gentlemen.
How you doing, brother?
So what are we going to talk to Adrian about? We're going to talk about cars? And we won't talk him how he's no longer, well, he's only got a few more months, well, not few, but he has some months to go. And I want to ask, like everyone else wants to ask him, is he going boating for a couple of years? Is he going to start going back to another challenge and another formula, another history that he can create? Because, you know, every car he builds, it's become so boring. If you notice, when he went to Red Bull, it's become very boring. When he was at McLaren, he won all those races there, and the same with Williams. So I'm just hoping he'll retire. Well, not really, but anyway, I'm hoping he'll retire. Tell us what you're going to do.
I mean, popular question at the moment. I think easiest way to answer that is, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, at the age of 65, would I seriously be considering changing teams, going somewhere else, and doing another 4 or 5 years, whatever, I'd have said, you're absolutely mad. And then it kind of, I think a few things happened at once. My dad, who was a vet, he was a huge car enthusiast. He had a little workshop with a lathe and a milling machine and stuff, and he used to tinker around and always modify his cars and play with them, which I guess that's obviously where things rubbed off on me. Anyway, kind of, he wanted to retire when he was 60, and he kind of semi-retired at 62, moved up with my mum to Yorkshire, and then did locums until he was 65, and then he was fully retired. And he kind of, if I'm honest, it's slightly emotional to say it, but he kind of lost his way a bit in his retirement. I thought he'd be very happy continuing to tinker around on cars and stuff, and he just lost his mojo a bit. And kind of combination of that, and then two of the people that I respect the most, Bernie and Roger Penske, asked them both, you know, what's your secret? Because they've kept going and going, and for their age, as Eddie will know, then they're phenomenally kind of agile and mentally agile and physically agile. And they both said that old thing that kind of the brain's like a muscle, it needs exercise, and so you need to keep doing that. And so, honestly, also, I think I've wanted to be work in motor racing as a designer since I was the age of 8 or 10. And I've been lucky enough to fulfill that ambition, to have got that first job and been in motor racing ever since. And so every day has just been a bonus, really. I just love what I do. So at some point, I guess, I'll have a bit of a holiday. As Forrest Gump said at the end of his long run, I feel a little bit tired at the moment, but at some point I'll probably go again.
He has a lot more modesty than I have, so I'm going to ask him the difficult questions. Certainly after what's happened in the last couple of weeks, he definitely has, but that's another story. For those people who may not fully understand the intricacies of what goes on in Formula One and how difficult it is, and it was, and I was in it for 15, 16 years, and I can promise you I left a broken man. So how he left school and has gone through all those teams. And just for the avoidance of doubt and for good order, he has won 25 World Championship races. And whilst that's a massive figure, I will lay any amount of money, I will sell every bit of house or anything I have to bet that no one will ever come even halfway close. And then put that to one side and just reflect. Between with Vettel, now with Max Verstappen, Red Bull have won 117 Grand Prix. Now that is simply staggering. And I know some of you, his old drivers are here. I see Mark Webber and I see his dad here. Well done to you guys for being here. But it is a fabulous, fabulous figure. and 117. Tell me, you've got to have a favourite car. Tell me, what was the favourite car that you had?
Oh, crikey. I mean, in many ways, I guess the first one I did, which was the Leighton House, which was a tiny little team. We came up with a car for 1988. It was a funny year where turbos were mixed with normally aspirated engines. So our car was probably, 100 horsepower down on the turbos. And we were a tiny team. We were 50 people, literally, which, bearing in mind now, teams are sort of 900, 1,000 or so. Anyway, we came up with a design which was kind of, I suppose, it changed the direction of Formula One a little bit. Famously, it was a bit small for the drivers. I don't think Mark would have fitted it, but probably get one arse cheek in it, and that would be about it. But it was a car that turned heads. It changed the design philosophy, I think, and that sounds maybe a little bit arrogant, but at that time, for a few years, it had been all about bolting the biggest, most powerful engine you could in, and then the biggest rear wing you could find to go with it. And because I knew we had quite a low power engine, then we really concentrated on aerodynamic efficiency. And so we were able to compete with that car, and I think by kind of later in the season we sorted it all out. So we finished second in Estoril behind Alain Prost and ahead of Ayrton Senna in the dominant McLarens, and then Ivan led at in Suzuka in the West until he got a bit excited and was fiddling the roll bar and flicked the ignition switch off, and that was the end of that. So, but it was the car that kind of I suppose put me on the scene, if you like.
Anyone who was watching or was perhaps there at the race in Miami, there was such an outpouring of love, certainly before the race, different after the race. But before the race, I think you got more publicity, more television than any other team or any other owner. And I think that's something that you mustn't ever forget, because in the 30-odd years that I know you, I've never met anyone who have said a bad word about you. You know, I think when you get a situation like that, I'm going to ask him, what was that feeling like inside?
Honestly, I mean, I never really think about it. I know it sounds a funny thing, but I just, like I said earlier, I've just loved my job. I love the design aspect. I love working with my colleague, fellow engineers in the team. I love working with the drivers. It's a multifaceted job, and it's quite a lot of variety. And sidetracking slightly, when I studied aeronautical engineering at university, not out of any interest in aircraft, but because I figured that racing cars was the closest technology to full motor racing. So a lot of my friends from uni went into British Aerospace or Rolls-Royce engines, and only one of them is still actually in engineering, which is quite sad. They've all moved into other areas because they got no feedback. And the great thing about motor racing, I mean, it can be very painful, but you, every 2 weeks or so, well, every flipping week now, the way the calendar's gone, then you know how you're doing. And so that feedback, I think, is what vitalizes the whole thing. And I guess that's what I've got used to over the years, and missing that, well, I know I'd miss it if I wasn't doing it. And that's again right back to where we started of, do I go again or do, and obviously Mandy has to be involved, but do I go again, or do I enjoy my oyster and sail off into the sunset?
Well, therein lies the question, guys. And if I knew, I would tell you. Mm-hmm. Actually, I don't know, so I'm not going to tell you. That's the easiest way of answering it. But, when you have 7 times world champion Lewis Hamilton coming out openly and saying that the number one and the first priority from me is to try and get Adrian to come and work with him, that must make you feel very good.
Yeah, no, it does, I have to admit. I mean, it's not why I get up. And it's actually, Miami is a really strange race for me, because I was kind of, the news had just broken in the press, On a very unfortunate day, it was the 1st of May, which was that horrible 30th year anniversary of the horrible events of Imola 30 years ago. So it was a very difficult and unfortunate day for that press release to come out. But then the Miami Grand Prix itself was strange because I was there in a strategy function, hence being on the pit wall, but I wasn't involved in any of the engineering decisions or in any of the engineering meetings. I was just being wheeled around for press, basically, and so kind of not what gets me up, but and I never really think about it. So yes, I never thought it would be big news, to be perfectly honest. Never really thought about it. So for it to be in all the flipping papers and on the telly and stuff was almost a bit of a shock.
Yeah, but a nice shock, nevertheless. It's something that you kind of dream about. Everybody looks at the telly and the camera's focusing on you, everyone is talking to you. And I loved in particular where you went and addressed all the staff in the garage. And the huge warmth of that reception, that would have got to me if I was you, and it must have got to you.
So I did 3 little kind of speeches or whatever you wish to call them. One in the engineering room at the racetrack in Miami, one in the garage, and then when we got back to the factory in Milton Keynes, one to the rest of the guys and girls back in Milton Keynes. And those were quite difficult, very emotional for me, because I'll be honest, having been at Red Bull more or less from the start, been centrally involved with Christian on how we developed the team, kind of Christian on the sort of general side and me on the engineering side, the culture, the ethos, the way we go about things, the infrastructure, etc., even the building layout and so forth. And to be involved in that and taken a big career gamble, which many people thought was pretty suicidal at the time, at the end of 2005, of going from a McLaren where we'd won 10 races that year to this start-up team that was, in truth, kind of just had the reputation of being the party team and quite knowing where we would get to then kind of win that first race and get the 1-2 with Sebastian and Mark in China in 2009, and then to go on and win the championship in 2010, and then everything that's happened since. To walk away from that was a very hard decision. But it's a decision I felt I needed to make for a whole host of reasons. But it was a difficult decision because they'd been my family, and I felt almost a slightly, not paternal, but I don't know, a degree of responsibility. But equally, the team's now it's very mature, it's well organised. So that in itself gives me an opportunity to be able to kind of walk away, look at new challenges, new things, without feeling that, and let the team fly. I'm sure it still can. One of the big surprises from the press announcement that came out on the Wednesday, or the Thursday was in the end, but anyway, just before Miami, was, so I wrote a little bit saying kind of thank you for the team and blah, 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 and I'd also like to thank blah, 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 and my close friend and manager, Eddie Jordan. And I think that's the one that nobody saw coming.
Not even themselves, actually, because it all happened over many, many years of happy cycling in Cape Town. Don't be deceived. This guy is an absolute killer on a bicycle. And it's a crap bike. When we get the next deal from Zach or whoever it might be, a proper new bike will be part of the contract. So we've talked about, should we talk about Frank? Because they were the early years for you when you went there.
There was a period at Leighton House in 1990 where Akai Akagi, who was our owner, Japanese owner, he was in financial problems. So he put our accountant in charge of running the team. And if there's one thing you should never do is have an accountant running a Formula One team. So anyway, the accountant and I had a terminal fallout, and so I said, oh, I've had enough. But luckily Patrick had said, look, would you like to join Williams? And so I did. And then we really got the car going quite well in 1990. We almost won the race in Ricard. So when I joined, Patrick kind of gave me pretty much complete freedom on the design of the 91 car, which in truth, the 91 Williams was actually a 91 Leighton House painted blue and white instead of green. And so in that sense, Patrick, we had a very good relationship, especially in the early years where Patrick had a love of gearboxes, so he designed the gearbox. He was super at organising the factory and running the infrastructure around the factory, and just left me to concentrate on the aerodynamics and the mechanical design.
I had a list of bucket lists that I wanted to do, and I found that getting away on a boat was the easiest way to relieve any stress, whether sponsorship, political, team principals meetings, all of the usual stuff that goes with Formula One. And I said to Maria, I said, look, I'm going to design and create a boat and go around the world. I'm going to join the Oyster World Rally. It's the very first one. And she just said, okay, I'll go. But I said, what's the conditions? There were only two conditions. One, that she learned how to dive underwater with her camera, and the other one was to do something to do with also about camera. You'd have to ask her. But they were very easy setup. I was saying, my God, she's actually going to come. And this was amazing news. And we set out, and that just goes to show you, the Oyster that we had was the very, very first 885. And it was now probably 13, 14 years old, maybe not, but it left Southampton with the minimum of sea trials because we didn't have time to get to Antigua. And it was a horrific weather going there, really horrific, 10-meter high. But once you're in the ocean in a boat like that, you actually feel safe, no matter if the water is all around you, but it's scary, there's no doubt about it. But it got there, and it made me realize, oh my God, this boat is so safe, I feel so secure in it, and I feel so happy with it. And we started there and went around the world. And we eventually went to all the places, the Galapagos and the Australias and Indonesia. And his boss, or Red Bull, own a beautiful island. They own Fiji, and they should consider going sailing there sometimes because it's just pure magic. Anyway, we went to Cape Town, and we were going to go home to see all the grandkids and the kids that particular year. And we changed tack, and we got them all to come out to us. And each and every one of them, either the wildlife, the cycling, the temperature, the ambient, the sea, the beaches. Honestly, in the Southern Hemisphere, it's hard to believe. So what's important, I'd like to ask him just to tell us, because I want to know the difference between buying a boat and buying a car. It must be in some respects quite similar. What are you looking for? But if you're looking for a blue water boat, if you're looking for something that's magnificently built, so safe and so secure, and just lounge, it's a different thing to motorboats. It's not better, it's not worse, it's different. So I was a motorboat guy for an awful long time. It's not my gig now, but then years catch up with you, so you kind of see things differently. I want your advice. Why did you go with Oyster, and why sailing?
Well, I think the first question is why buy a boat? And that was down to you bugger.
Don't blame me for this.
Eddie and Marie invited Mandy and myself on their Perini Navi Blush in Corsica. And we went on it for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, had a lovely time. We had dinner on the swim platform, what we call it, one evening. And I think he got the mechanical dolphins organised, so they came and performed just in front of us, and it was the whole romantic thing, and it was lovely and like that. But I've always liked the idea of sailing. I've never really sailed as such, apart from dinghies and so forth, and being involved in the America's Cups, so completely different angle. And we loved it, but we didn't want a boat as big as that. Eddie had always said the 885 was his favourite boat. And we looked around at others. Irvin Laidlaw, who's a very good friend that also has a place in Cape Town and knows a huge amount about boats, we asked him, and he said, well, it depends what you want. If you want quite a sporty boat, then I think you go for a Swan or something, I can't remember. Then if you want an in-between boat, then you go for a Southern Winds, which is built in Cape Town. If you want something that's a really comfortable all-rounder, that's really solid and well supported, then go for an Oyster. So we had a look around at those makes, and the Oyster was the one that really ticked all the boxes. It's got great support. It's for us, of course, also at Southampton, which is quite nice, so I can go down and see it. It's a couple of hours down, well, not even an hour down the road from where we live. And really, it's been a great experience. It's I suppose rather naively, I thought it would be kind of it'd be like going into a BMW dealership or something. You go in, pick a colour scheme and a few bits and pieces, and that would be it. And then you'd wait for it to be built. And in truth, it can be like that if that's what you want, if that's what you've got time for. It can be much more involving. And of course, with my nature and design bent, then it became much more involving for me. And I think what's been really great about Oyster and what's been so rewarding is the fact that they are very willing to tailor and adapt to specific needs and requests. So in our own case, then it's been putting an extra hinge on the swim platform so that there's enough space to put a table and chairs and so forth on it. Because eating close to the water, just a foot or so above, is very different to eating on the deck. A solar bimini, because I wanted to kind of have an ability to minimise the generator diesel consumption, just to try and be a bit greener, and also for quietness and silent night. But having said that, in truth, the Oysters are very well sound insulated, so never really aware of the Jennies running, but it was mainly the ecology side of it. We did some other bits on sort of slightly battery bank and so forth to go with the solar panels, did some interior layout changes, and it's been a real pleasure to do it.
I think that's the best endorsement you could get for an Oyster, ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't that fantastic? So thank you for that. But before we let him go, I just want to think about, with all this kerfuffle about, do you continue racing? Do you think about taking time out? You've got to tell me, there's something in your mind. You wouldn't have gone and bought a boat unless you say, I fancy Napoli, Naples, and the surrounding area, and Stromboli, Capri, or you want less away from that in the winter. We go to Lefkas and Kefalonia, and honestly, you would never think it was August, and you don't see anybody. That just happens to suit us. Winter is different if you want to go to the Caribbean. But have you got some semblance of idea of what you'd like to? Because this is the ultimate blue water boat.
Yeah, and so I suppose I skipped in terms of then talking about the alternatives of monohulls, sailing monohulls. The first decision, of course, is sail or motor, and I like the idea of harnessing nature and using sails. Extra challenge, more to do. You're not just kind of doing that and waiting to get there. It's what's that saying? It's about the journey. It's not about the arrival. It's about the journey. With sail, it's about the journey. Is the way I look at it. And then the sort of monohull versus catamaran. I love aesthetics, and I think monohulls will always be more elegant, prettier, if you like. And also, they only do one thing. They rock side to side. They don't do this sort of complicated motion in a heavy sea that a cat will do. So that was an easy decision. It's really looking forward to getting it.
Could I borrow that for a second? Do you think we could have, because Adrian and Zach Brown flew down here yesterday, or Thursday, and they did it without my permission. And I'd just like to know what kind of a conversation they had. So, Zach Brown, could you not be too shy and get your ass up here till we hear what you have to say? Would we like to hear from Zach Brown? Yes. Come on. This is not the time to be shy. Where is he? Huh? He's just gone. He's the runner. I'm sorry. That's what you have. And no, there's no ink on any paper, and it doesn't matter whether it's blue, black, or red. It's not relevant. And I have a belief that no decision has been made, and neither should any decision be made. He has achieved so much in his lifetime. I think people get scared when they see the numbers and the figures and the successes. And as a friend, I applaud you. I love being your friend and Mandy, and I love the Cape Town experience, the cycling. And that's how this relationship had just bore out of being just normal guys going for a cycle. And if I can be of any help to him and what has happened and in the future, I'm there for that. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody. Thank you to the Yacht Club and Bernard, wherever Bernard might be, for allowing us to be here, because it's pretty much a full house. And drink up plenty, because Richard loves to see people having a nice glass of wine. And so thank you very much, everybody.